My name is Shelly Harrison, and you're listening to Speaker Central, sponsored by Sadat and Associates. On this episode, we talk about change management and process optimization. My special guest today, Hassan Archer. Welcome to this episode of Speaker Central, powered by Luminary Leaders. I'm your host, Shelly Harrison. Each week, we open the conversation with our guests to unravel their solutions, perspective, and get into their mindset of business based on our current business climate. Our topic today, change management and process optimization. And I would like to welcome my guest, Hassan Archer. And Hassan, come on.
Hi, Shelly. Thanks so much for having me on here today.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm really excited because we've had a few opportunities. Not only are we in the same professional networking group for CEOs and executives, but we've had the chance to kind of chat offline about our businesses, and I've learned about what you do, and you've learned about what we do at Luminary Leaders too. So again, I'm excited to have you with us. So Hassan, to get started, can you tell us about yourself?
Yeah. Let me see. So how would I summarize this? So I summarize myself as technology meets psychology. So if you look through my story and I lead you down that thread, I came from 18 years in software development. So big companies like Microsoft, where I built products for millions of people. I've worked for a series of startups. I've worked for a series of consulting agencies, doing digital transformations. And the common thread throughout my career has been looking at systems and processes that are inefficient or broken and figuring out a way to make those systems work for businesses so that they can make money.
Yes, and those systems are critically important, right? To profitability, to, employee morale, all of those
Yes.
things that it impacts.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So every piece of that company, every piece of that system is involved in the success of that enterprise. So it takes a fine amount of detail to really understand what's going on and what we need to fix it.
Yes. No, that and I can appreciate that because I own my own company, and you and I have talked a little bit about that and systems and things that that I've had to implement in my company just to keep things where they need to be for profitability and just steady growth. Yeah. So I have a question that I want to ask you, and I want you to just answer it the way that it comes to mind. Okay. I'm blown away at how my consulting firm blank.
Drives alignment.
Drives alignment. Tell us about that.
Okay, so this goes back to the point I mentioned earlier, where it's all the details of the company, every piece of it must be aligned. And when your company is not aligned and you have different silos operating, or people who don't understand what the goal is, or don't have a common understanding of what we're trying to do together and the common sacrifices, that's where things start to fall apart. And I've seen that at Fortune 100 companies, and I've seen that at four-person startups. Everyone has to be aligned, executives down to the person who greets you when you walk in the door.
Yes. Yeah. No, I like the way that you answered that right away. What are you wildly excited about when it comes to change management? Because I know that's an area that you really work with your clients on. So share with me, what are you wildly excited about with change management?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm psychology meets technology, or technology meets psychology. And fundamentally, I enjoy seeing people be successful, and people make up businesses and corporations. I like to see those all be successful. And so what really excites me is going into a company, understanding what's going on, understanding what their assets are, what their strengths are, and then understanding the gap between where they are today and where they need to be. And then when I start to meet with people and understand what they're doing, what their dream is, that's what powers me. And that's what gets me up in the morning, because I say, I'm going to go in there and we are going to figure out how to fix this thing. We're all going to pull together. We're all going to row in the right direction. And this CEO or this executive team, they're going to be heroes.
Yes. Yeah. That's cool. Where does your perseverance and drive come from?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I've always played team sports.
Hmm.
And so I've looked at how teams work together. I actually studied this in my grad school program, and how people come together in teams to accomplish a common goal. And the same way you can look at a sports team and you can say that any one individual doesn't win the game, but together they make the finals and together they get the trophy. And that's
Yeah.
been my experience as well, both in sports and in business. That if you can get the right team together playing the right sport and they all know how to win, that's where you see amazing things happen.
Yeah.
And for me personally, when I see a team achieve something that nobody thought was possible, that to me is exciting, because that's when I can go home and say, that's amazing. These people reached their potential
Yeah.
and they made something happen.
Yes, yeah. And not only that, what you do in a company, bringing those teams together, it's imperative, because I think especially now, with the coronavirus and, all of us at stay-at-home orders, where teams are separated, and they still have to function and work together even though they're in separate places.
Yep.
And there's a lot of information out there, and people that are doing live feeds and things to help people cope with, being kind of displaced and not in their actual office. But team morale and the that whole piece is critical, especially when you want to have a company that's profitable, where people believe in not only the service but the culture of the company. Wouldn't you say?
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, I've spent the past 10 years working with remote teams and distributed companies.
Hmm.
And so when this whole system changed with coronavirus, for me, it was, oh, I've been working with people who are in other countries and other states and different time zones on projects for many, many years. So for me, that's not challenging. But I
Yeah.
also understand that for a lot of companies, just understanding there's a lot of company lore and IP that is really predicated around people being in the same space at the same time. And if you look
Yeah.
at a company that makes decisions via, hey, this just happened, we just got this email in, or the client just said this to us, let's quickly huddle and get a meeting together.
Hmm.
How do you change that process? How do you optimize communication and actions across a distributed team when nobody has done this before? And
Yeah.
that's something I help companies with as well.
Yes. And I would think that there are a lot of companies that are reaching out to you to find out, or help them, really embrace the dynamic of the way teams are working right now. I know I have a couple of people that have done, like I said, the Facebooks, or they've, put things out on LinkedIn, and it is, I mean, across the board, and it's in other countries, it's here in the US, and obviously here in California.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
again, I think it goes back to my theme of alignment, because
Hmm.
alignment more challenging when you don't see somebody in the office.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure that your teams and your executives are all staying together and working on the same goal? And one of the challenges I see companies run into is that in this new world order, how do you ensure that the right things are happening now so that in 3 months you're not surprised? At some point,
Yeah.
we will come out of this situation. We will get back together again. We will rub shoulders in an office, but we don't want that time to be the realization that, oh, wow, Johnny's team went in a completely different direction 3 months ago, and now we're behind. So it's how do
Yeah.
we look at driving alignment now with the tools that we have, the technologies we have, the culture that we have now, the opportunities that we see, so that
Hmm.
we're set up for success when things get back to somewhat of a normal, we can then start running again.
Yes. Yes. Very good point. Very good point. I know that you recently, well, not so recent, but before coronavirus, you started your company, because you
Mhm.
you know had left the corporate world, and now you're doing your consulting. So, what pokes out to you about starting your company during this kind of a season, so to speak?
It's interesting when I look at change management and optimization of processes. I have to also apply that lens to myself, because I came out of corporate America, starting my company with certain understandings of the market, of my own processes, of what my assets were and how I utilize them. And then
Hmm.
within a few months, it became the world's upside down. You can't leave your home. You can't meet with people. I can't show them on a whiteboard and we can talk through things easily.
Yeah.
So I've had to, as we used to say when I was at Microsoft, eat my own dog food, which is use my own processes, my own change management techniques on
Yeah.
myself for my own business.
Yeah. That's a good analogy. I like that. Yeah. So tell us, what makes you unique as a consultant compared to maybe competitors out there or your colleagues who are also business consultants?
So if you look at my background, I spent 18 years making software. So I have the technology side. My degree undergrad was actually computer science. So I understand the software. I really know how it's made, not from a
Hmm.
theoretical, but from an actual practical point of view. And then on the other side, I did my master's in psychology. So I understand what motivates teams, why some teams fail, and more importantly, why over 2/3 of change management operations fail within companies. So you have to understand how to process empathy with the current situation, understand
Hmm.
why change management is hard, and also know what to move it towards, which is how can the process work? Where are the holes? Because I've walked in them. I know what it
Yeah.
takes to get the changes pushed through.
No, that's phenomenal. And I think that the empathy piece, that comes from, your background and having the master's degree in
Mhm.
psychology, because that piece is important, especially when you're working with, you're dealing with people that have families, and sometimes they bring, this family issues or, you know, things that, that they come to work with. And it's hard to press through that when, you have to have some empathy, you have to have, understanding, and teach that to probably the CEOs and executives that you're working with so that they have that empathy piece to be able to enable their teams to work more cohesively.
Yeah, you'll notice with a lot of teams and companies that we do things for a reason as people, right? There's some motivation, there's something that has helped us get to where we are, a series of techniques and tools that we have that have led us to success. And then we get to a point where we might face a situation that we haven't dealt with before, and then our
Mm-hmm.
tool set is insufficient to get the next step. And
Yeah.
so it's not that people don't want to change or that companies don't want to be successful, it's that they don't know how. And to do something different, to use new tools is very challenging for people. And you have to
Mm-hmm.
understand that this is really hard. And that's a piece I
Yeah.
think a lot of consultants miss, is that it's not a matter of people being widgets and we can just say, oh, stop making blue, now make it red. There's a lot that goes into those decisions and what that means for people.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And I think change management, that's something where a lot of companies, when it comes to change, it's hard to navigate that boat, and especially like a change like we have today, just with our, with the pandemic and trying to, pivot our businesses, whether they're a large organization or, smaller companies that are still trying to weather through, this change that we're all experiencing. What specific process optimization advice do you have for mid-sized companies during this time?
So there's a couple of things I suggest right now for mid-sized companies. I think this is a great time for companies to take a step back and take a breather and really look at what their assets are. So understand what they have, what's still strong, and what they could leverage for the changing times.
Mm.
One of the things I've seen companies struggle with is they take a knee-jerk reaction to the changes and they end
Hmm.
up trying to do what they were doing before, but doing it faster and faster and faster. It's almost like there's um, a sense of if we just take what we're doing and we do twice as much of it, then we should get the result. But you have to realize that situations have changed, expectations have changed. Employees are scared, markets are
Hmm.
uncertain. Even the people you sell to might be asking for a different product because they have different needs. But if you don't
Yeah.
take the time to step back and really say, what's going on here? What do we have to offer the market? Then how do we know that we have something from 6 months ago that's going to actually fit the market of today? And so I caution companies to just take a step back, do an assessment. That's one of the first things I do with every company I work with is we step back and say, okay, let's really look at what's going on here on the ground
Yeah.
before we start making decisions. Because when you start making decisions and changes, right, that causes stress within your employees. It can affect your customers because they wonder what you're doing. It can affect your investors who are looking at their money and are they going to get it back? So a lot of stuff starts to kind of swirl around. So just take a pause, take a deep breath, and let's think about what we're doing and what assets we
Hmm.
have for the current market.
Right. And now you can actually help companies do that assessment, right? Because before they
Right.
start planning or implementing anything, they really want to hire you to do that assessment with
Exactly. Before,
in conjunction.
yeah, because before you start spending money, it's like I say with software. Once you start building software, you will keep paying for it because you have to support it. And
Yes.
once you start changing directions on your company, now you've spent a bunch of money getting people aligned, maybe altering people's positions, maybe changing people's positions, maybe furloughing or laying off or hiring. I mean, a lot of stuff starts to happen really fast. And the
Yeah.
next thing you know, you're managing the process, but you're not picking the destination. So let's pick the
Right.
destination first, and then we can figure out how to optimize the process to get us to that destination.
Yes. Yeah. So with that, why don't you describe your ideal client that can greatly benefit from working with you?
Sure. So my ideal client is someone who is tech enabled, and that's kind of a fancy way of saying either that they are making technology, software, or they're using technology or software to run their business, right? So they're comfortable with that. And it's a company that's probably somewhere between $5 and $20 million in revenue a year. And I pick that number for my clients because that's large enough where there's a proof that the product has a place in the market and can be sold, and there's a demand for it, but
Mm-hmm.
also small enough that they're able to pivot and make changes as necessary. So that's
Mm.
kind of the size, the companies I'm looking for. Industries really have not been a challenge for me. I mean, I've worked with finance, insurance, entertainment, retail, healthcare, automotive, transportation. I mean, I've worked all over this, all over the verticals throughout my career. So it's really just, are they interested in change? Are people
Mm-hmm.
in the company willing to say, let's get a new perspective?
Yes. And that makes you an ideal consultant when you can have experience from all those different industries where, depending on how many companies you've worked with and, let's say in the entertainment business,
Hmm.
you can then take that, whatever you did with that company and help the next company. Not that you're going to share, any confidential information, but that process, those, things that were proven to work in that one company, and now you can kind of take it across industries, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And some of the industries I've worked with, maintaining confidentiality is a very big deal,
Oh,
especially in
absolutely.
finance,
Yep.
entertainment, media, that sort of thing. So I definitely don't share any of those things across clients. But I've worked with some of the biggest names in those industries, and a lot of those processes and practices that they've used to become very successful. I enjoy taking those things and then forming them in such a way that those smaller companies can take advantage of those and then
Mm-hmm.
grow as well.
Yes. Yeah. As far as collaboration, what does that mean to you in your circle of influence? With, when you look at the professional group that we're both in, which is 10 Star, led by Steve Kinney, and just what are your thoughts on that in terms of the collaboration and that piece of
Yeah,
it?
yeah, I think collaboration is key to success. I think the idea that there is a hero who saves a company or a hero who makes a product successful is a fallacy. I think we're seeing this more now and now as companies become more globalized, and we start to see that talent doesn't reside in one person's head. So if you don't know how to work together as a group, you're not going to get the best out of all of your people. So for me,
Yeah.
collaboration is about understanding what you do well, what I do well, and knowing when to say, wow, you know what? That's not my expertise, but I happen to have someone who's close to me that I trust implicitly, and
Yeah.
that person can do this really well. And in that case, I love to bring those people in. I have a very strong stable of people I've worked with both previously in my career, plus people I've met recently that I've had the opportunity to do some thought leadership pieces with. And we all want to help each other, right? We all want to say,
Yeah.
hey, you know what? This is where my expertise stops. This is where yours starts. Let's partner
Hmm.
together and make this better.
Yes. Yeah. I I really appreciate that feedback. Um, as far as a company that, or a person or people that are looking to launch a new business, what guidance or advice would you give them right now under the circumstances? Because there are people out there that really either were in the midst of starting a business or they're thinking about starting a business because of something that came from COVID-19 and now it's an opportunity.
If I was starting a brand new business now, I would probably, again, take a bit of a pause and think, now that things have changed, what does this actually mean for me and my business? I've looked at a lot of the businesses that I work with, and they tend to fall into three categories. Either right now, their business is going gangbusters because there's new opportunities and demand is increased. Their business is about where it's been, just hasn't really been that affected, or they've had a really hard time and now they're trying to cut back and maybe entrench a little bit. And I think before a new company launches or you start your new business now, I would encourage someone to stop and say, what do these new changes in the market mean for me? Does this put me into one of those three categories? Do the assumptions I made before I began playing this business still hold true, or are my assumptions now changing? One of the companies I was most recently talking to, they had decided to mothball one of their new product launches. And I said, okay, well, that's interesting. I think let's talk through that a little bit because I think there might be an opportunity for you here. As we talked through it, they began to realize that actually with their customers stepping back to say, what are we doing with ourselves? Where are our budgets going to go? There's an opportunity for that company to step back and think, well, maybe we should look at this and figure out what our assets are. And the tool that my client was working on is essentially a new assessment that allows people to figure out what their strengths are and their team dynamics. And I said, that is perfect right now because team dynamics are changing. So rather than mothballing that, why don't you bring it out into the forefront and then think about how can you sell that product and reach the market where it is right now. Maybe you can't do an on-site implementation or workshop, but perhaps there's a way you can implement it online where it can be on demand 24 hours a day. And then CEOs or their executives can run this from home. So there's opportunity there. But again, I would encourage people to take a step back and think about what has changed and what new opportunities have arisen that I can take advantage of.
Yes. Yeah. And probably the most important thing is that they probably should consult with you or someone like you that can really help them walk through that and take it to a place where, is this something that is going to work, or is it something that, like you pointed out, taking a pause and maybe waiting until the whole situation right now gets a little bit easier for people, so that just the economy could get back to where our new normal is, right? Because we're not going to get back to where we were before. It's going to be a new normal.
It's going to be a little bit different, and no one knows exactly how it's going to be different. But I think this is a great time for companies and new companies, especially, to step back and say, what assumptions are we making? And how do we roll with the new world that we may be walking into? If you look at some of the current themes like remote work and technology that's driven our ability to keep products in development, even though we can't see each other, there's a good chance that that's not going to go away. And that might lead you to an opportunity to then hire talent in other areas that you couldn't access before. So that could be great for your company, but then you have to think about, what does that mean for your onboarding process? What does that mean for doing work together as a team? And, you can see how that kind of ripples through your company. So if they can bring me in and we can have that conversation, start to look at the possibilities and not just how do we retrench and hide, I think there's some great opportunities out there right now.
Yes, I agree. And you know what? Hassan's information is going to be at the end of this broadcast. Hassan, thank you so much for being here with us. Our time has run out, although people can catch this podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Anchor. It's going to be on YouTube. And you gave a great amount of just information that can be so useful to companies. And Hassan, as far as, any last words, do you have anything that you want to mention that maybe we didn't talk about?
I just want to reiterate that this is a time of great opportunity, and this is a time for companies to really get ahead. And that when things do change and the world opens up again, some companies are going to run forward very, very quickly. And I really want to help companies prepare for that because the times will change. There's a ton of opportunity to pursue.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks again. And we'd like to thank our listeners for tuning in. And we will catch you next week on Speaker Circle.
Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you.